Hello, and welcome to Bandstand, the official podcast of the Tennessee Bandmasters Association. I'm your host, David Adelit, and I hope you'll join us on a journey through the past, present, and future of bands in Tennessee. We'll delve into the rich history of Tennessee bands, uncovering the hidden gems and legendary figures who shaped the state's band landscape. We'll survey the present, where you'll meet the movers and shakers of today, gaining insights from their expertise and experiences. And we'll gaze towards the future, exploring the exciting possibilities that await Tennessee's school bands. All right, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Barry Kraus and Dr. Ollie Liddell. Today we are talking about choosing music for concert bands. So I think I want to start this with a question to both of you. And we'll go with Ollie first. What is your number one? When you sit down to pick something for your group, what is the number one consideration?
My number one consideration is what the music that they will be successful in. That's just in everything that we will perform successfully in whatever we're trying to do. Generally, we're talking about concert festival. So we want to be successful and that they will gain the most success from. That's my number one consideration.
Okay, Dr. Kraus, your turn. And then also just go ahead and talk about your research project. I know that's going to be super fascinating. So
sure, yeah, well, I'll do what I can to try to dumb it down into layman's terms. I hadn't done that kind of research in a long time, so crunching statistics was not a fun process, but it's interesting. I agree with Ollie. I think and what I found in my research, suitability and the ability of the players to execute the literature successfully is paramount in people's minds when they're choosing literature, particularly for CPA when it's being assessed. But for me, here I am, college director, so my students, have some advanced ability and we're able to play almost anything. But at the same time, I'm always thinking, okay, that piece would be better when my freshmen are juniors and they've had 2, 3, 4 more semesters of applied lessons on the oboe, and then they can achieve that moment in the piece when the oboe reaches the higher tessitura, and that won't be as painful. I think keeping in mind and along with that, it's not just about the single piece, it's about the program and the flow of the program and the variety of works on the program, and how will this work contrast to the other one. So I think there are a number of angles to approach that question from.
Okay, you both said successfully. I'm doing air quotes. What does that mean? I ask this because I did a piece a couple of years ago. It's a very difficult work, and it was a really emotional experience for me and for the kids in the ensemble, I assume, because they played it really well. And the day after concert festival, we were just doing a debrief, and this one tuba player, who was a mid-state tuba player, goes, "Yeah, I didn't really like it very much." And I just went, whoo, deflated, because I came away from it with this sort of like euphoria. It was successful, but this kid, I guess he didn't like the tuba part because he was a good player. So what does that mean for you to be successful on a work?
Well, that's a loaded question.
I know. You're both doctors. Say, look, you guys have got the big degrees. I'm the bachelor's degree guy over here, so you can handle it.
Okay, success. It's several aspects. I guess the number one thing for me, and we're dealing with success, is I'm always looking for growth. From A to B, I'm always looking for our kids getting better over this stretch of time. Sometimes you can pick, and let's look at it from the difficulty, just that portion, just the difficulty of music. I'm gonna kind of hone the question down a little bit. So if I pick music, and you know how the grading system works, grade 1 through 6 or whatever in Tennessee. Not all grade 5 pieces are the same difficulty, even though they're grade 5. It's not necessarily the same. So I'm looking for, when I say success and growth, is this going to help a kid if we're, our concert festival here in Memphis area is in the early March, like the second weekend in March, second week of March. So if we're late February and I'm still telling somebody this is first valve for B flat, on trumpet instead of second valve, if I'm still dealing with notes and rhythms, I'm not really teaching, I'm more training. So that's usually where I'm looking. So that means the piece was probably too difficult. I'm not teaching them how to play well as an ensemble. I'm training them to press the right things down. Now, I guess that, I don't know that we're getting the semantics, but that's the way what I look at is when we leave this month, January. Matter of fact, we start school here pretty soon. And when we leave January, if they're not performing notes and rhythms, then I think the music's probably too hard. And then I'm not really teaching. They're not learning. They may get better, but it's not. That's the level of success I'm looking for. Also, if it's too easy, they're not gaining anything. They're not improving. There are certain aspects, obviously, in phrasing and interpretive things like that. But I want all of that. I want them to get better their technical facility. All of those things have to improve, and that goes with the level of music that I'm playing with our ensembles. And that's the most important thing there. When we look at success, also, it's a lot of aspects, but just the difficulty aspect of it, that's why I look, they're able to perform this music successfully, get through it, and gain something from it as far as improvement. If we just look at difficulty. The other thing is just to introduce my students to different music. Certain pieces are important, right? I think it's just really important pieces of music, and they need to be exposed to those pieces of music. And even if it's so difficult, what are they getting from this exposure? If they can't perform it, what are they really gaining from it? For example, I think First Suite we're programming that this year for my top ensemble. I think it's an important piece of music, and the kids need that. It's been about 7 years since. So I really hate that we haven't played that particular piece, but I want to make sure I program it this year.
Mm-hmm.
We can get into why this year later, I guess, but they need to be exposed to that. That's an important aspect of success as well. So it's a lot. That's why I said it's a loaded question. It's a lot to get into, but biggest thing is what we look at is we look at mainly difficulty, the exposure to different types of music. To sometimes I pick music to stretch, like, oh, this is just above their level. And that's what I look at. It's just above where they can play, but that goes back to, you have to know your ensemble. You have to know your kids. You really have to know them. Can they, and that's a tough thing, man. It's like I can teach them this, and you can get into that. I can maybe, but you got to know.
They'll
Yeah.
get it by the concert.
Yeah.
No, they won't.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a moving target, the difficulty of a piece and the students that are sitting in front of you. And, the research out there, the review of literature shows that students who are just coming out don't have those skills. Like undergraduate training is not adequate enough to teach somebody how to evaluate, okay, this poor bassoon player is going to be able to get that in 2 months or not. It's like, what are the pedagogical benchmarks that person's going to need to achieve and be able to play that? And sometimes, like the first reading is a little rough, and then, they'll be able to get that if the notes and rhythms are in place, as Ollie said. But I think there are so many factors to that argument. Being successful requires that, you have the students that are capable of doing that. And if they don't demonstrate it initially, they show, or that they will be able to do that by the time the performance rolls around. So curricularly understanding the capabilities of your students, even if they're not evident right at the onset. I think in my research, what I did find, one of the things I did is I had 19 survey items. I had items of resources, like where do people look for literature, and I had items related to criteria. What are the most important things that you consider when choosing literature? And the top 3 things in criteria were appropriate technical challenge, opportunity for expression, and pedagogical usefulness. And then going on from there, I had a hunch that the popularity of the composer was going to be a hot item, It wasn't. That was at the bottom of the list. It had a very low mean rating, and people in the survey didn't indicate that that was really important in their selection process. So, what we're talking about is suitability, evaluating pieces for success, and that's essentially what people are doing in the profession, looking at the difficulty of pieces and then kind of making an evaluative judgment on whether or not their students are capable of achieving it.
So that speaks to the marketing ability of certain composers then, perhaps? If directors aren't considering, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but that seems to make me think that they're making their choices based on where they see the works published or how they see them published or social media presence of a composer, perhaps, or hearing other bands play the piece. Can you speak to any of that?
I can, yeah. Actually, in sources, the two top-rated sources were core repertoire list, which honestly, I think people might associate the Tennessee State list with core repertoire list, like that's our list of core repertoire. Whether or not we would consider it to be or not, it's a list of approved pieces for CPA. But core repertoire list was number one in sources, and then recommendation by a colleague was number two out of 10 options. And interestingly, at the bottom of that list was publisher's choice list. People didn't indicate that that was a very strong indicator. And that completely blew my mind because I thought, well, people are going right to J.W. Pepper. They're listening to the 5 new works on that list for band, and they are selecting those because what you see on the compilation of CPA programs is a high number of those composers and their works, listed number of citations. So it's an interesting conundrum. Either people were not being honest, or they were maybe they felt guilty and thought, well, I better answer truthfully that core repertoire is most important. So who knows what happened there? But there were 116 participants in the study, and that's kind of where it came out. So I found that to be interesting.
What constitutes a bad choice? I know that comes from a negative perspective, but that's what usually stings with us emotionally, right?
I want to hear Ollie's response to this.
It goes back to my early years of teaching. And let me say this before we go. I think choosing literature, as far as your preparation goes, is the single most important aspect of that process. And that's just a concert for mom and dad at school, or concert festival, or CPA, as most of us call it now. That's the most important thing. So I have made some just spectacular blunders in my career, and it was and some were just early on. There was a couple things. First, I picked music that was way too hard for the group that I had. I was a middle school band director in Mississippi. I want to find those kids and just apologize to the dumb things I did as a young band director. And most of it was being hard-headed. I was like, well, this is what you're supposed to be playing in middle school. We're gonna play this, and the kids I had, we just couldn't play it. And this was days before concert. There's a sign. It's like it's about a week out, and I'm still telling folks to press this down. I'm still, I'm still working over those issues, and I never could get to let's make the actual music making portion. If you never get to that, then it's what are we doing? The second mistake was picking music I like.
Mm-hmm.
I just love this piece, and I love it, but my kids can't play it. So that was the second mistake I've done. It's just pieces that I just love, but I can't. We don't have the horses to play it, and so that was a mistake I learned from. So that's why you pick the music that your kids can play. They will, because what are the goals? You got to think, what is the goal? What are we trying to do? The competitive, just the us band directors, we're so eager we got to get superior ratings. That's okay. There's that. There's hey, we have to. What are my kids going to gain from still just until they're appreciated, they can't, because it's too difficult.
Yeah, I would say that just because you got a 1 doesn't mean you chose your literature the right way. You know what I mean?
It is absolutely true.
That would be like, saying something like, if you call heads and it's heads, then you suddenly are a genius. Like
Right.
sometimes you just get lucky, right?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes the panel is easy and they're just handing out ones. We've all seen those before. So,
Oh yeah.
it depends on where you are. Like if it's your first year to school and you've got to establish credibility to sort of move things along, you might make a choice that goes more towards getting that external
Mhm.
affirmation for your kids. That helps with administrators and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I hope you're picking music for your kids that gives them a great musical experience. Because I'm with you, Ollie. For me, that's the number one thing. Because for me, it's how the kids feel about their performance affects their student musical experience, which affects their morale, which
Yep.
affects how many donuts you're going to sell in the fruits in the donut sale. How many kids come back to band the next year, and then also just beyond that, just advocating for music as an art form, right? If
Right.
the kids leave your program because they had a bunch of really good musical experiences in concert band, then they're probably going to buy tickets to the local symphony concert, or they're going to encourage the fifth grader next door to them to be in band. You know what I mean? So it's a wide that question is such a huge. How do I say this? I'm totally going to have to edit this part out. That's the magic of podcasts and not radio, right? Dr. Kraus, thoughts?
Oh yeah, I agree. I think I've been on two sides of that. You pick music. One of my dissertation topics was the concept of flow. And if you read any pop literature about flow, Csikszentmihalyi, and the engaging in an activity for the sake of the activity and staying motivated in the activity because you're constantly being pulled along by the challenge. And I think that's where we lie as directors. We've got to provide those experiences for students to be in the flow channel where they're constantly growing. Now, we can't, as you mentioned, the tuba player earlier that maybe didn't have an interesting part and didn't enjoy the piece as much. Maybe that person's challenge level was lower, but in an ensemble with varied skill levels, you're going to have a bunch of different people at different places on the experience spectrum, and some are going to be challenged really highly, some will be in the middle, and some will be not challenged very much at all, based on their experience and what they're having in front of them. So, finding pieces that challenge everyone equally and they're at their level is just one of the most difficult things we can do as directors and takes the most time. I have been, as college director, most of the students at the middle school, high school level have never seen that piece for the first time. So when you introduce it to them, they're going to believe everything you tell them about that piece. If it's not a great piece, they're going to think it's the greatest one because you put it in front of them.
Dr.
So they have
Kraus
no
said so.
previous experience. Yeah, but I do have students that come to me at Belmont, and particularly our second ensemble, where those students are not music majors. They just want to continue having a performing opportunity. And, they tell me, hey, I do a survey. What music would you like to play next year? And I always get their input. And they say, oh, by this composer, this piece that we played in high school, that was amazing. And I look at that piece and I go, I don't know if I believe in that piece, or I don't know if I can grasp, I don't know if I can make up a convincing program note to sell that piece to an audience. Like there's just
Hmm.
not enough substance there. So we play the piece, they've already played it before. Some of them have, and it's similar to a lot of pieces they played in high school. And they get to a point where we kind of peak like 3 weeks before the concert. And then it's like, what do you do now? At this point, we should have played the concert tomorrow. But there's not enough there to keep them engaged. And then I've been on the other side of it where I played music that was conceptually far too difficult in terms of texture or organization or form or just requirements, that they were dealing with all the details and specifics. And we never got to the music on top of it. So finding that sweet spot, I think, is really important, that we kind of consider the literature. And when we're planning for diversity in programming, we're thinking about pieces that kind of address different things in different ways, and not the same stock kind of ternary
Yeah.
presentation that we get in a lot of the school band literature. So it's a very difficult process.
I think along with the choices that you make that fit the kids, you have to also sort of improve them as musicians, right? You have to take the time to play recordings for them that aren't recordings of music that you're not performing, so that you can tune their ears a little bit to set the stage. Like if you're going to play Persichetti Symphony, you have to do some work before day one. You know what I mean? Speaking of Persichetti Symphony, and to the point you were just making, Dr. Kraus, about the piece that sort of runs out of steam 3 weeks out from the concert, Brad Kenny, who's one of our TBA Hall of Fame giants of the past, I watched Brad in one rehearsal for 20 minutes once, and it's probably some of the best rehearsing I've ever seen. This person was incredible, and he did the Persichetti Symphony at McGavick one year, and he passed it out, and he also read something else that was sort of equal in length and difficulty, but it wasn't nearly as sophisticated. And the kids, of course, day one were like, "Oh, we like this other piece better. We don't want to play the Persichetti." And Brad, being the genius that he was, made a bet with the kids. He said, "I bet you by the end of this concert cycle, you will love the Persichetti and you will hate the other piece." And he said, "And here's what I'll do. I'll rehearse both of them exactly the same amount of time." And so he spent equal time on both pieces. And you know what happened? By the end, the kids loved the Persichetti because you keep scratching on it and keep finding more layers of beauty and expression. And the other piece was vapid, and the kids couldn't stand it. So what a great lesson for those kids to experience that, right? It's one thing to hear it from your director, "You're going to love this piece," but it's another to go through that process and get that experience of learning what it means to really play works of meaning and merit.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's in itself a real challenge to find music like that. And some of the best musical experiences that I've had with my groups are the ones that students absolutely hated at the onset of the reading. And this is not a work that most high schools would attempt, but the music, Joseph Schwantner and the Mountains Rising Nowhere.
Mm.
When Belmont had never, the audiences had never heard anything like that. The faculty had not heard that piece played by a wind group. And I thought, this is a huge gamble. The students don't really understand it. I invested in it. We talked about his techniques, how the piece was composed. We spent some time on it. And that in the room was one of the experiences. At the end of that performance, there was a long silence. And one of the students sitting over on the left side of the hall just stood up and yelled, "Yeah!" And then the audience stood, and it was on the second piece on the concert, we got a standing ovation. And it was just the way that was presented and the depth of that. But the students didn't like it until they realized how powerful it was to an audience of listeners if they just, go to that unfamiliar territory and make that happen. And I think, with pieces, a lot of our music in the educational realm was composed with commercial success in mind. So it's composed in that ABA format with the coda and similar orchestration. And I don't mean to go off on that because I live in that world too and have to choose from those pieces. But I think if we program in a way that we feature several of those pieces in a row that have all of the same techniques, it becomes, as you mentioned, a vapid presentation. And I think that's where we get into when we look at CPA listings from the previous year and go, well, who was successful? And that's what people are doing. And so my research, some of the qualitative responses indicated that too. One person said, "I go to the last year's CPA list, I make a list of colleagues that I admire, and I look to see what they did and what rating they got and what they played." And I think Jeff Beckman mentioned that to me once too. He said, people are going to that list and going, "Well, they got a one with that piece. I should play that next year." And I think a lot of that is perpetuated by that cycle. So yeah, interesting. But I find myself in the middle of all of that too.
I would like us to move away from that kind of choice, which leads me to my next thing. Ollie, you're the TBA band chair. You're past president of West Tennessee Band and Orchestra Association. What can our associations do to sort of shepherd our directors in terms of the choices they make?
I think it starts at the ground level. I think it's mentoring. I think we have to just kind of just grab hold of these younger directors and just take them. Hey man, just put them around, put our arms around them and tell them, hey, because that's really that's how I got better. And my mentor was my dad, and once I stopped fighting him because he's my dad, like, I don't know about do that, because and listen, things became easier and I understood more. And I think that's what has to happen. I think we have to do a better job of mentoring our younger directors. we're going to get into open up a whole nother conversation about college and the preparation of what's wrong there, what's right there. But as they're out here, they just need to be mentored to show, hey, this is what one thing that helped me, and this wasn't even your question, but one thing that helped me. Um, like we talked about earlier, knowing your kids, knowing what they can do. How do I do that? Is get a lot of literature in front of their face, but that I don't want to go there. I want to talk about how to just pick literature. I I picked my literature for years, just going to the TBA list. And after I know my kids, that means I know what level we're gonna play. And I say, this year we're gonna be a level 5 band. That's what we're gonna, because that's what we can read. We can sight read at level 5 successfully. Well, I literally went through the entire state list, every single song. I know it sounds crazy, maybe, I don't know. I went through every single song on the grade 5 list, song by song, and made sure I can go to J.W. Pepper or wherever, Stanton's, and see a score. And I look at the score and listen to the song, and I went through the whole state list, and I made myself little notes, this song, and I did it over the Christmas break. Because we just, a lot of times, we're just sitting around the house, eating food, whatever, and just did it all day for days on end. I still do it, not as much now because and I know there's some certain things on that list. I can't play it this year, but boy, once I get me a good oboe player, I'm gonna play this one, and I still it's on my laptop right now. A list of songs. Hey, this works. This one's easy. This one, hey, if I have a band and they're just not that, hey, I will play this. So once I get this section together, or I get a good such and such tuba, whatever, that's what I play. I think that's how and it does two things. You learn literature well. As a young band director, man, I didn't know other than Lincolnshire Posey. Yeah, we know the stuff. What young
Is that
band,
what you play with your middle school band, Ollie?
right? Yes, yes.
You guys are
We
going to
know
love this moment.
the some of the college, those, but do we know grade 2,
Yeah.
grade 3? We don't know that.
Yeah.
As come out of college, you knew what you played in your college winter song, but you don't know what.
Yep.
So that's how you dig into that list. Is it the end all be all? No, but it is a excellent starting place. This is quality rep. It has been peer reviewed by directors and all over the state. You can check, hey, go through this list and listen to it, and you learn literature that way.
Yeah.
That's
You have
one way to do it.
you have to put in the time.
Yeah.
Like once in a while, you'll pick the right piece after 10 minutes of spending time, but you have to keep going until you get it right. And if it takes 10 minutes or 10 days or whatever it is, you have to put in the time. I love that you went through the entire, and in Tennessee, pretty much everything we have every
Right.
piece that's ever been written on our list. So the fact that you took the time to go through all those is awesome. What are the things that people miss on the most? Like at the end of the concert, when it's all over, what are their main regrets? I would say it's orchestration is oftentimes.
Yeah, I would agree with you there that I think that's one of the considerations you have to make when you program a performance for an audience. You have to think about the orchestration. High tessituras versus low tessituras, is it all scored in the middle? Is it thin or thick texture? Are they all the same sounds? And again, the commercial format does all of that. So being really diverse in your programming in terms of sonic presentation to your audience keeps them listening too, and causes some interest to kind of flow through your performance. So I don't know, Ollie, you've got some thoughts on this too.
I think the mistakes can be from, do I have independency? So if I have
That's
maybe,
a good one.
I don't know, it's some solos, right? A lot of solos, and I know I have this solo and this instrument. They can play the notes and rhythms. It's not an issue, but do they have the mature tone quality that really, or to play this expressively, and or are they just going to get through it? That's a big mistake.
That's a big mistake too, because the kid knows.
Oh yeah.
Like if you make a bet on a kid, oh, I think they'll be able to play this, and they're not, then you're stuck with them playing that not just on the concert, but for their friends every day in class and being
Mhm.
uncomfortable with that performance and on a Tuesday, you know what I mean, just in class wearing their blue jeans. And if we think back to what their musical experience is like, you've put that kid in a position that they're going to be uncomfortable for a long time.
I agree with you. We had that experience this last fall. English horn solo, freshman English horn player was our most qualified candidate. And that person needed probably another year or two to develop to the maturity to play that solo, which is one of the greats in the repertoire. And she was the person who was there at the right time when that was programmed. And, that ultimately went okay, but was it uncomfortable? Yeah.
And again, back to our success conversation, if you define it only by whether you well, you're not getting a one at concert festival with Belmont, Dr. Kraus.
Right,
But
right, of
if you
course.
define it only by the success of the final concert, then maybe that's too narrow a measure of success. You know,
Yeah,
maybe that's the spark for this student that leads them to great things later on. So
yeah,
Think
possibly.
that might be the byproduct. It's like one of the getting a superior rating is could be a byproduct of
yes,
success. It's something that comes along with it.
that's how I try to always think about it, especially later on.
I don't even the way I nitpick, I, I always look at, man, it's kind of hard to explain. My process is so so that we have we have broken it down so much where it's like well we're not thinking about a superior rating. We're thinking about perfection. Um, let me tell a quick story. So actually 7 or 8 years ago, we played not Lincolnshire Post, I'm sorry, First Suite and Incantation and Dance in the same concert festival. That was stupid. That's another loss.
That's a lot.
That was a lot of work. But and when we did that, we worked and worked and worked. We got off stage, and me and my students, we were walking down the hall, getting ready to go to sight reading. It was horrible. We just thought it was the worst thing ever. And band directors literally just rushed me in the hallway. Oh my God, it was just so awesome. It was so awesome. I'm like, I'm thinking they're crazy. We got straight superiors, but what our standard was so high that we didn't even know. And I listened to it after. Oh, it was good.
That's a great story.
Yeah, yeah. David, if I could add something from my research that I found, I compared novice teachers who had taught 1 to 5 years and those who had taught 6 years or more, and in the groupings on professional development topics like recommendations from colleague reading sessions, there was a statistical difference in that novice teachers rated those experiences as more important.
Hmm.
So, if the research can tell us anything, it's that we need to provide more professional development opportunities for young directors in their first 5 years to sample repertoire and get their hands, dirty, talking to people like you and having experiences where they're learning about the possibilities. To make a long story short, I took all the survey items and did a factor analysis. So, and what that does, it gives you 5 things that are happening in your survey. So, one of those items was professional development, which included things like recommendations from colleagues, all state band performances and honor bands, seeing music live, previous performances, sight reading sessions. And I know we do a big reading session through KHS here in Middle Tennessee, and I think West does one as well. But those experiences are really important for new directors because even though with the internet being out there, a lot of them don't go out and make lists like we were talking about. So having first up performance opportunities with new music in a live setting is very important. The other interesting thing, so that is all to say that I think what we need to do with the association is just provide significant professional development opportunities for those young directors to acclimate them into the climate for the repertoire and make sure that they have a good understanding of the depth and breadth of what we're offering to our students. One of the other findings I found, this is interesting. We were talking about success and suitability and making appropriate technical decisions for the ensemble. But I found that high school directors in the study, I divided another grouping, high school and middle school directors. And I found that high school directors rated the item's suitability higher than did middle school directors, which I think is interesting. And, so I'm thinking, why is that possible? And I'm thinking what Ollie was describing, you've got access to a wider variety of repertoire. So, you have, you could play grade 3 or you could play grade 5. And you have to be far more discerning based on the skill set, the diversity of the skill set in your ensemble. And it is perhaps maybe that middle school repertoire in grades 1 through 3 doesn't require the same kind of discernment in terms of diversity of parts. So, that's one of the next questions I have. Why did that happen, and what's really going on here? So, but I found it interesting.
So you're saying that the high school directors have somewhat of an advantage because they have more grade levels to choose from? Is that, do I understand?
That's kind of where I'm going. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking that that happened. In that the literature is so far more diverse in terms of requirements.
Yeah. Now,
Is your research, is it based on Tennessee directors, or this is a nationwide?
This is Tennessee directors. So I put the survey out to Middle East and West Tennessee, and had participants from each region that responded to it and gave me their thoughts about the sources that they use, rated those from 1 to 5, and then the criteria that they use to choose, rating those in importance. So interesting findings.
and this is coming out in what publication?
I'm submitting this to the Journal of BAM Research. And I'm actually coming out to Memphis for the cbDNA convention there at University of Memphis, and I'm presenting a 20-minute session on this research at that conference. So I think that happens in late February, maybe early March. So yeah, I think it's interesting. It's a starting point, and you can only tell a few things from a survey, and it leads to other questions. So now I have lots of other questions about why the results came out the way they did, and potential future studies that might look at this in a different way. I think a long-term study is to look at the program that we use for CPA, and the programming, and looking at the trends over the years. I've done some initial study and collected some data from 2015 through 2019 and looked at that and the trending of certain composers, but I think that should be an ongoing thing. So it could be interesting.
Okay, so if we want to talk about this might be a whole other podcast too, and that's the Tennessee Bandmasters Association approved list. It is
Massive.
I don't even know what to say about it, honestly. Like, it needs work. Everybody knows it needs work, but it's so daunting to fix that thing, because there's a difference between an approved list and a recommended list, right? And that TBA list is an approved list. Maybe there's some work to be done if we can clean that list up. Maybe there's a way to go in and look at each piece and provide some more detail about it. Maybe there could be it could be 2 or 3 categories. Like if you look at the grade 3 listings, maybe does not require solos. That could be a topic or whatever.
An
so that a young
bibliography of pieces.
A little bit. So a young director can look in and go, okay, I got 17 kids in my band. Like what inside this listing of 2s or 3s can I really choose, to help them sort of narrow their focus towards the choice, so they're not looking at everything, because that decision paralysis is a thing. And maybe they don't have the time that I had when I was teaching, or the time that Ollie has. Maybe they've got 3 kids and they have to work 2 jobs, and they also teach choir, general music, and have bus duty. Maybe we can do some things, back to that association question, to help young directors narrow their focus with the choices inside the choice. Does that make sense? What do you guys think about that?
Sure, absolutely. I think that that just screams committees. Develop a committee for each grade level, and have those people look into it and then make assignments. I mean, that is certainly possible. It's finding the people that are willing to do that.
Teaching music through performance in band, that book series, GIA publication does some of that. I remember when the guy first came out with the book, what he did, he went to find pieces that were the same across all states, that were approved in all states on their list. And at least that's the early version. It does some of that breakdown on those pieces. But some of these guys, they leave college. I don't want to do this reading stuff anymore. What's
Well, I think you're getting to the question, David, like, should the list be reviewed and purged periodically? And maybe so. I mean, I haven't examined every piece on that list, and there are probably some favorites in there that people say, oh, absolutely, this should be here. But maybe, PML in Texas is a constantly reviewed list. Illinois, Iowa, they review those lists constantly because of discussions that have come up like this within the profession.
We can aspire to that. What about equipment and instrument considerations? Specialty percussion instruments that are required. You mentioned English horn earlier, Dr. Kraus, for you on the collegiate level. What do we think about instrument and equipment considerations when directors choose music?
When I choose music, I don't. Well, the instrumentation is more of than equipment. Um, for a young band director, maybe this is an issue, especially in a rural situation where your next nearest school is 20 miles, 30 miles away. But in an urban district like ours, there's been several instances where I'm like, man, I need to borrow these crotales. I don't have any. Can I borrow? And that's an issue that's easier for a situation that I'm in. But for someone else, it may be a problem. Hey, I can't borrow this because the next band is an hour away or whatever, and then they don't have it, so I need to go. That could be an issue. It's more of an instrumentation deal for me. I'm not picking a song with an English horn solo, and it's a prominent. I'm not picking that. We don't have an English. I have an English horn instrument, physical instrument at the school, but I have one oboist in my whole program right now, so I'm not gonna pick a song like that. Or unless it's something that's doubled or it's cued in another instrument, and we get to another argument. Most judges now are they have common sense that everybody doesn't have, and the problem with some of the younger bandwidth is they'll play that piece and won't rewrite that part for another instrument or and think it's okay. Like, no, man, you got to have it covered. If it's an obvious oboe solo, you don't have an oboe player, and so it's just not. That's happened before. That's happened with younger bandwidths, and judges now are like, okay, we understand you don't have oboe, but you need to at least cover the part. And some of my older colleagues, they'll say, well, no, that was so frowned upon 30 years ago. If you don't have oboe player, you can't play this piece. But now it's like, okay, it's cued. Okay, fine. If it's not, that's why on my journey, I would literally look at every single. I wouldn't just listen to it. I'd look at the score. If I couldn't find the score, that was automatically, just find it. Someone had a preview score or whatever I can find online to find a score for those pieces of music. It was automatically disqualified. I can't see the score. I can listen to it. It sounds great, but I'm not ordering that piece of music for us to play without that. The one thing that you didn't bring, and I just thought of, is can we get it in time?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
J.W. Pepper used to be the man. I would get a piece of. I could order it on Monday. It'll be in my in my box on Wednesday morning. Now, I don't know. Really, since COVID, it seems like they're not the same J.W. Pepper I remember. Where it's you really have to be way early ordering your music, and if it's back ordered, all those things, you have to really be on it.
Now this makes me think, Barry. I wonder how the e-print function on J.W. Pepper influences director selections. I wonder if, because so many of the new composers have
right
gone
away
with e-print, that's sort of funneled them towards.
It has, and the newer composers are also using that a video where you can hear the piece and watch the score fold by. And you can't do that for the Persichetti Symphony.
Right.
You can't go on YouTube and find a score recording with the recording playing in the background. So I think, yeah, it does influence like the ease of accessibility for works that are available to you with limited effort. I think is probably compelling in some cases, and that's where I think a lot of those older gems in the repertoire get lost because people aren't exposed to those. And as Ollie was talking about earlier, like the college college training is not sufficient. Like when they get out of college, they think, well, I played music for Prague. Surely all high schools can play that. And that's just not the case. And, they don't learn the 3 or 4 great pieces in the grade 3 list that are appropriate for middle school band, and have a kind of a running repertoire of those. So, and that takes a long time to develop, as you mentioned before.
I had a thought and then I got distracted by another thought.
That's kind of where this whole podcast is going.
2 things. That's just my brain. 2 things, though. Hopefully I'll remember the second point. Number one, maybe that going back to that sort of the list inside the list, maybe we need to create a starter pack. If you're a brand new band director and you're looking at grade 3 for your high school band, here are the 5 pieces you could consider first. And maybe that's not good. Maybe we're not creating enough diversity in our programming and repertoire, but at least give them a place to start, so that they're not overwhelmed. Maybe that's a thought. And man, the other thought I had was really good. Oh, well, that's why we have to do a second segment. Thanks for listening to Bandstand. If you have topic suggestions or need to get in touch with us, email us at tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Your input is important to us, and if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss about the past, present, or future of Tennessee bands, please let us know. Again, that email is tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Right now we're broadcasting on Spotify and YouTube, so please subscribe, review, and rate. Box 5, please. And more importantly, share this podcast with your friends. See you next week.